this is, I would say, probably the second in our series of this year's Meet the Director events. If you were able to attend the last one that we had, this was really, that one, we really did a lot of discussion on, you know, who really fits our program, right? Kind of just digging into what our student body is like, and just to get a good idea of whether you fit, because this is something that's absolutely critical to us, and we think really makes the program. Our students absolutely make the program. Today we're going to dig into the pillar of academics, right? So what's the benefit of really pursuing an academic program in entrepreneurship, right? Those might not be the two things that everybody would say go hand in hand. In following with the truth that our students really do make our program, I just want to say that once I go through my little spiel with you, my talk, we're really fortunate to have Taha and Sharina. So Sharina is a student in the first year cohort right now, and Taha is a student in our second year cohort. And there's a lot of things that you can hear from me, but I think they offer a really rich perspective on, okay, what's it like to really be in this, right? So Jeremy might say that, but let me tell you what it's really like, right? Or just questions that they could answer, right? So I think we're lucky that they're joining us, and I think they can please feel free at the end to direct questions towards them as well, or I might just shift them over because they could answer better than I could in some of these things, right?
Jeremy, can I just very quickly interrupt you for 1 second? I was just going to let people know that we're recording the session. And what we tend to do is we cut it off at the point of the question and answer. Last time we actually left the recording running, and because we couldn't actually identify any of the people asking the questions, just the students, we left that in the recording. But please let me know if you don't want to be recorded. We will cut it out at the end. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kirsten. Yes, that's an important piece of housekeeping just to keep everyone aware of. So I'll put up sort of the picture that I think many of you, if you've looked at our program, you've seen before, right? So it's this diagram that really shows the three pillars of our program, right? The academics, the practical application, and the peer and community engagement. It's worthwhile speaking a little bit, and this was just a conversation that just came up recently of, wait a second, what does this even mean by a Venn diagram on this, right? And clearly it's not that we have some people interested in academics, some people interested in practice, and some people interested in peer and community engagement. We have all, the students, the people we want in our program recognizes the complementarities that exist between all three. So that's really when I say we live here. That's what we're about. It's recognizing there's, huge bodies of knowledge of academics, huge bodies of knowledge of practice, and huge community engagement that might not fit, but our program really resides there. Today, I really want to focus on that upper left-hand circle, right? The academic bit. And it's one of these where, clearly the true value of the program is in that intersection. At the end of the day, this is a 2-year commitment to an academic master's degree from Cambridge, from the Judge Business School. And it has to rest on some academic foundation, right? And it's one of these where, I think I spoke about it in the last webinar, and clearly, we always, through the interview process, we bring this up again. There are clearly many other options, right? And the people could go to accelerators, right? You could just do self-study as needed. You could try to self-curate the pieces of a program together, which always begs the question, okay, well, why actually pursue an academic program like ours, right? And this is the part where, I usually say in interviews that it might seem odd, like we're trying to push you away, but clearly we're not trying to push you away. We want everyone to be clear of what it is and what why we think that is important, right? So when we look at that, I really say, and I think, if you've looked into our program, we always talk about, well, it gives clarity of thought, right? What do we really mean by it gives clarity of thought, right? And there's, there's a lot of practitioners, there's a lot of successful entrepreneurs, there's a lot of talks out there, there's podcasts out there, right, Sharina? There's lots of anecdotal evidence, of listening to entrepreneurs and hearing from entrepreneurs, hearing success stories. There's a nice comic out there. I don't know if anyone has seen it. I think it's the comic strip XKCD, right? That shows a speaker up on stage, and it's a speaker who just won the lottery, right? And they've got the bag of money next to them. They're, the speaker's just talking about perseverance, and you just need to simply put more effort into it. I worked 3 jobs and just bought more lottery tickets, and if you buy enough lottery tickets, you too can be successful, just like me, right? And underneath it says, every successful speaker should always begin with a talk on survival bias, right? And it's the notion that, yeah, there's lots out there, but how do we, separate this signal from the noise? Well, if I'm listening to this, how do I know whether that will actually work for me, right? There's lots of possible alternatives, right? How do we separate out different biases, right? People have wishful thinking bias, attribution bias. How do we separate all these things out and try and figure out what really matters, right? There's always lots of possible alternatives, possible reasons, but how do we get to something that, well, has a good chance of working for me, right? And this requires some guidance, right? This requires some sort of framework, right? And this is where academics can really, really help, right? When there's lots of options, how do we choose, right? And this is ultimately, a lot of the time when we talk about clarity of thought, it's really about contingencies, right? So, okay, I know these things work. When does one work? When does the other work, right? There's a nice paper by Lee Fleming and Sorensen that talks about science as a map. And I think this is really, the academic learning, the academic theory as a map, right? And it's the idea that, when there's a lot of ambiguity, or we're just entering into territory that we might not know that well, we're generally going to look at a map, right? And it's going to provide some sort of guidance. It might not have every detail we need. It might show us more than we need in some cases. It might miss a bump, but it really can help save a lot of wrong turns, right? And it can just provide good directions. And this is really, academic learning, science theory is this map, right? It's not perfect guidance for every single thing. But it's generally going to help us get our bearings, right? And help us understand, okay, where do we need to go, right? Beyond the map, academic guidance just helps us, sometimes through struggle, but it helps us to break things down a little bit and try and figure out how to simplify things, right? And, in the world we live in now, and in entrepreneurship especially, figuring out how to simplify things is just so critical, right? I have the Rube Goldberg stamp over there, right? It's one of I think many know of these, but the Rube Goldberg machines, right? Figuring out the most complicated way to get at things, right? But there's so much truth to this, right? So often when we see a problem, the complex solutions are the ones that come to mind first, right? These are ones where I'm a mechanical engineer, right? And I'll be the first to say that I love to come up with cool mechanisms to try and figure out how to get things done, right? Definitely as much as the next person. But at the end of the day, that's usually the easy part. The really difficult part is kind of figuring out how should we really think about this problem, right? Figuring out how to represent the problem. What are the core questions to ask? This is really, really the difficult part. And sometimes discounted part, right? That we might not put enough attention towards it. So let me give just a little toy example of this, right? Which some of you might have seen. Has anybody heard of the bird and train problem before? Here's the participation point. See if I see any hands fly up in the chat or anybody. It'll be interesting if there is. So either no one has or no one wants to come forward and say they have. But so let's go through this. You're probably reading it already. So we've got someone seeing it. Okay, so Rohit, you've seen this before, and hopefully you'll get why I say this is a good example, right? So the bird train problem is one where, the idea is there's two trains. One starts at one side traveling at 20 kilometers an hour. The other's at the other side traveling at 10 kilometers an hour. They start out 150 kilometers apart, and they're just gonna go towards each other. At the same time they start, a bird starts at one side, and it's gonna fly at 50 kilometers an hour. Now it's gonna travel all the way until it hits the other train. Then it's gonna instantly turn around and travel back until it hits the first train. When it hits that, instantly travel the other way and back and forth. And the question is, how far does the bird travel until the trains collide? That's, when you look at that, I show this solution over here with a big question mark next to it, right? You can try and represent this in some sort of math recursion and try and do it in a sequence and figure out, wait a second. So I have all of these things moving at the same time. I need to figure out when the bird actually hits the train, because that's not going to be at 150 kilometers away. And then they have to turn around, and figuring out the distance that's really complex, right? Come on. So throwing the answer in the chat window already? Are you serious? Wait a second here. This is not the point to throw the answer in the chat window, right? Okay, I'm gonna, thank you, Sharina. Wow, at least give me the second to go to the next slide and say the simple solution instead of boom, here's the answer, right? Okay, point taken. Someone wants to get at this. The point is, it's very easy to represent this, right? And generally, when you frame it in terms of how far does the bird travel, and I think even some of you who put up this simple little answer, my guess is that's not the first thing that came to mind, right? You first start thinking about the bird traveling, and then it's going to hit, and then it's going to come back, and how do I figure out this at the same time one's moving and the other's moving? Maybe maybe for some of you, I'll say for me, it's not the instant one. So I'll put myself out there that when I see that problem, first I have to start thinking about, how am I going to figure out the recursion of this? But the trick, right? Obviously, even the answers in the chat window don't really give you the trick, right? The trick of this is saying, how could I ask a different question? What's the real question here? Well, how long until the trains collide? Well, it's 150 kilometers and, two traveling towards each other. Well, that's the same as one train traveling at 30 kilometers an hour. It's going 150 kilometers. Oh, okay, 5 hours, right? That's very straightforward or much more straightforward for us to wrap our head around. And then you're saying, oh, if it's a question of 5 hours, then really the question we're saying is, how far can a bird fly in 5 hours if it's flying at 50 kilometers an hour, right? Those two questions are fairly straightforward, right? So it's one of the point trying to make here, and this is, you guys, even I'll even throw it back. You guys even helped me a little bit to make this point, right? Because it's not, the point isn't about the answer on this. The point is about the questions, right? So the point here, if you asked if you would have thrown in, I would have been, and maybe I easily could have missed it because I'm trying to pay attention here. If you would have put in there the questions instead of the answers, right? That's what we're trying to get at, right? And we're trying to get at, wait a second, how could we think about this differently? How could we represent the problem a little bit differently that's going to prompt different questions, right? Good questions are not obvious, right? Much too little emphasis is placed on trying to figure out the best questions, right? And a lot of the time, the best questions come about because we need to change the representation of things. How do we look at it? From whose perspective? What's the process? What are all the different frameworks we could use? And one framework might prompt different questions than another framework. And through that process, we get at, oh, wait a second. Now it's clear, right? So I started this whole thing of, we talk about academics or help with clarity of thought. That's the process we're trying to get at, clarity of thought, right? And that, I think, that was the purpose or the intent of this little toy example. Kudos to everyone out there who put the answers, especially if you put that answer up there without having seen it before. I'd be extremely impressed, right? That's a whole nother task. But so academic pursuit, definitely pushes us, right? And in many cases, it pushes us in ways that might not be comfortable, right? What do I mean there? Well, an academic degree, different than self-curated, self-taught, self-study, is going to force us to take some classes, right, in terms of the core, that might not be very comfortable, right? So I can speak on this one, and I'll probably, hopefully I'll even get a giggle out of Sharina on this, but it's one, I have the privilege to teach one of these classes, right? That the systems class is not necessarily a class that everyone entering into the entrepreneurship degree is like, oh, yeah, I'm ready to dig into process and analyzing process and gets a little bit mathy at times, right? But it definitely pushes us to think about things differently, right? And it might not immediately be obvious why it's even useful, right? And some of these are things that, well, it needs to incubate a little bit. And then sometimes when we put this together, hopefully we start to see how, wait a second, I know we were digging into all these little bits, but when I step back from it, I see it a little bit differently. It's important to realize that, you're not alone in this, right? So there's across different subjects, they're uncomfortable for different people. And that, that's one of the real benefits of, we're talking about academics today, but we live in that intersection, right? We have all the peer engagement, right? And there's lots of things that help us through that. But this sort of gets to the idea of the whole academic program is really a mosaic, right? There's a lot of pieces that when you're just looking at that one piece, it might not look right to you. It might not feel right to you. When you step back and you figure out how all these pieces fit together, then it works, right? A lot of the time that takes time, right? As you're building that mosaic, the picture might not be clear at all. At the end, that's when we get to see it, right? And it's on that one, it's really one that even just takes, as time goes on, it's really lasting, right? So the impact, the learning, the frameworks, these are things that do take time, right? To really realize all their value. Right? But this whole notion of the mosaic, it's one where the academic program also just brings in all of these different perspectives, different faculty, different disciplines, different lines of thought, right? With just enough overlap, right? So there's overlap there, but it's overlap looking at similar things from really different perspectives, which is really, really useful because it also helps you to empathize with the different stakeholders you're going to interact with. It enables you to be a better translator because, at the end of the day, I'll say as an academic, right? We do speak very different languages, right? I could talk to another academic and it's like, we are not speaking the same language, right? As a student in the program, you get to hear these different languages and you get to recognize, wait a second, they're looking at the same picture, but boy, they're saying really different things, right? So it's, being able to be exposed to that and hear those different languages and learn those different languages puts you in a really good position to deal with all the different stakeholders. And coming back to, it enables you to really come up with different representations. It helps to reveal blind spots, right? All the things that are like, I never really thought of that, or I didn't think of it that way. Or someone else saying it, sometimes we would be like, I don't know what they're talking about. Now we say, wait a second. I see what you're saying. So what you're saying really this, right? So it sort of allows us to, it's that translation piece, right? At the end of the day, it just, it's this toolbox, right? And you can say toolbox. The other analogy or metaphor for this would be, sometimes a buffet. I think the toolbox is a little bit better because here it's one where we're going to give you that toolbox, even if some of the tools in it, you don't quite see where you're going to use them tomorrow, right? The buffet, generally people think of like, yeah, but if it doesn't look right, I'm just not going to eat it, right? The toolbox you're going to take away, and the toolbox is going to have the tools in it, and they're tools that can be useful, right? Some tools are going to use more than others, but the key thing is the toolbox, it's pretty lasting, right? It's pretty time invariant. You're going to be able to use them. And there's always things there that, look, later down the road, you might dust them off and you might have to remember exactly how, but you've had that exposure and it just gives you a little bit more confidence and understanding, right? It's again, comes back to the idea of contingencies. In terms of contingencies, well, you might even be looking at two options, but once you have all this exposure, you might recognize that, wait a second, the two options that I'm looking at, first off, I might be looking at the wrong thing, or those are only 2 out of a set of 10 options. So this is the idea of the blind spots. And now I need to I have a better idea of how to figure out, right? How to get across these things. This does bring us to the part that, it's not easy, right? It can be challenging, right? Again, I return to the fact that it is an academic degree from the Cambridge Judge Business School, right? So it's not meant to be a walk in the park on that, right? It does take patience. It takes time. I have in parentheses here, and I probably again would see a smirk from Shreen on this. We continue to learn on this. It's one where I would argue this past Michaelmas, this past autumn was a heavily front-loaded term, especially given the current context. These are ones where we're always, we hear our students on that, and it's one where this is one. So we try and figure out adaptation and try and adapt things. But it's one where also the faculty and everyone just are anxious to prepare our students, right? So it's balancing, like, you just want to give the students as much as possible, and always trying to figure out the balance with everything going on, right? So, but it does take time. I think it's really important, and I think it might have even been the last webinar. And I'm we don't have all the answers, right? So I'm not here to pop in the chat all the answers to the questions, right? We really try to ask good questions, right? And a lot of the things we learn from you, right? So this is one where, by definition, entrepreneurship has to be at the leading edge and is going to be finding things and pushing the boundaries of understanding and frameworks. And this is where the back and forth of, okay, so help me understand how this is different. And let's try to understand whether the framework applies or doesn't apply. Let's try and struggle through this together, right? And it's one where, I think it was the last one where someone, do we have a secret sauce or secret frameworks or secret proprietary things that, we'll pull out the dusty book that no one else gets to see? No, right? I think we have, the secret sauce, I think for us is is the context we're in, how we put all these things together, the students that we have. It's how, again, that intersection of everything. That's really the secret sauce, the curating of all of the different courses, the mosaic, right? So curating all of that, putting it together, making sure we have good match between people and program and objectives, humility, all of this that's what makes it. But look, as an academic, when you come up with a new framework, no academic is going to try and hide that. It's always going to try and be shared with as many people as possible, right? So it's not that, no one's trying to keep something super secret and show it to you, but how we go about that, the students, the peer interactions, right? And this is really the last part, right? All of this is offset by remembering that academic portion is just one of the three pillars. And it by no means is it just off in the side where, okay, do the academics and then come and do all this other stuff, right? No, it's, struggling through whatever academic theory frameworks, a systems class you're trying to figure out, you're going to be talking through this with your peers, right? You even in cases it could be, the relationship with your mentor. You might even say like, have you ever found this useful? Do you ever use this? Is this something that there's the mentors, there's your peers, and then sometimes it's one of, there's students who throughout the term will be like, I get it, this system stuff. Where, hey, if you think about vaccines and the supply shortages and how you're going to get stuff, and wait a second, so the throughput, all of this, I do see this stuff, right? So, I mean, having the opportunity to go through these frameworks and then apply it to what you're trying to work on and say, wait a second, is it applicable? Or asking, the same thing, asking some of your peers, like, does that really matter? Have you ever found that useful, right? Well, actually, or those discussions are huge. And that's, that's part of why, we have all, not just your peers, but we have all the industry speakers come in and they can give their perspective on okay, real world, rubber meets road, what's going on, right? So it's one where, today's focus is on academics, and I don't mean to say it like scare you with like, whoof, but it is one where there's lots of criticality, and hopefully this provides an overview or just, at least our perspective on why we think it's an important thing. With that, and I haven't, so I've seen there's a bunch of stuff on the chat. I have not been paying attention to that while we're doing that right now. We are fortunate, as I mentioned, to have Sharina and Taha, students with us, and then we have Kirsten and Laura with us. So we have people from the program team, we have students, I'm here, and we will try to address questions as best as we can. With that, I could try and funny, the first thing I see is speaker is a little anxious. Sorry about that. Some people may, so my energy doesn't come across with everyone, right? So it goes. Let me see on here. In terms of questions, also feel free to raise your hand and just speak up. Thank you, Adrian, for defending me on my passion versus being anxious. This is are there any questions programmatically for me, for the students, for the program team? aside, we don't need to get into my style. That's just me. This is fine.
Jeremy, if you want a first question, somebody was asking in the questions the difference between our entrepreneurship program and the social innovations.
I was trying. Yeah, thank you. So it's hard for me to scroll, and it's also just not a good thing, use of time for me to scroll while we're doing that. The first thing that, when I talk to the directors of social innovation versus ours, there's two key parts. At the first thing they try and say is theirs is more aimed at research, right? So theirs is much more of a research focused program where students are in there because they want to do research on social innovation. The other one is always the specialist versus generalist perspective of things, right? So it's one of, if you want social ventures, and not interact with a cross section of entrepreneurs, then that's the cohort. There are people, all of them, interested in social ventures, right? In our program, we're not focused on any single vertical, if you will, of entrepreneurship. And in fact, this is something we wholeheartedly recognized and even early on course corrected on. So early on, there were industry seminars, and the industry seminars used to have people sort of sign up to which vertical were you in, right? Are you social venture? Are you fintech? Are you healthcare? Are you real estate? Are you manufacturing? Are you retail? And then it segmented people into those verticals to attend industry seminars. We wholeheartedly believe that's not the best thing to do, because our students are, one of the things we're super proud of is the cross section and diversity of our students, right? So, in terms of backgrounds, disciplines, nationalities, interests, age, everything. And then to say, okay, we have all this diversity of interest, and then we're going to segment it to people that have a common interest. A lot of the really valuable discussion happens when you get someone, whether it's a social venture or whether you're talking fintech and healthcare or whatever it is, where you're saying, like, you're actually looking at, and it relates even to this conversation, when you break things down into a different representation, you realize that you're actually trying to solve the same problem, but meanwhile, you're coming at it from such different perspectives that you get to ask each other, wait a second, why do you do it that way? We do it this way. And that understanding and that dialogue and that conversation is really rich, really powerful, and just advances understanding a lot. So for us, we really try and promote that as much as possible. And so our program now, it's one where this acknowledges a trade-off always, right? So it means not every conversation is going to be, if you're, on one single thing. You have to listen to other perspectives, right? So there is that, it's that trade-off of what's the right thing for you, right? Do you want to really just embed yourself in social ventures and have a more research bend to it? Or do you want, are you really interested in entrepreneurship and the cross section of it? And those are ones of, I'm not the one to say which is right for you. That's what you have to decide. We will, if we think you're better fit for that program, we would want to steer you towards that program, right? That's kind of our take. So thank you.
Jeremy, there's a whole host of questions now in the chat feature, but we've also got one hand up. So I'll leave it up to you who you want to choose.
So I have to scroll way back up, huh? So now we're trade-offs.
We have one question, I think it's a very good question, on networking. And that question is immediately followed by somebody saying, can we hear from our students? So maybe you want to...
I was going to say, if you want to talk on networking, I would definitely shift that question over to our students. They can much better address that question. Shrina, Taha, who wants to take that?
Yes, I can, if that's okay. So for me, like the real value that I got from this course, I think after reflecting, I kind of came to the conclusion that it's based on three primary aspects. The first, as you mentioned, Jeremy, which I want dig into, is the academic part. truly know that what you're doing in entrepreneurship has already been done. And if fundamentally you will make certain mistakes, but with this program, you will avoid a lot of them. So that's the first one from an academic perspective. As for the network, it is truly one of the greatest opportunities that I had to meet people from all different backgrounds and to know that there are a lot of experts in the field. So I had the chance to actually found a society with a couple cohorts mates, which allowed me to even more extend that network and meet other society from Cambridge, which are not related to entrepreneurship, but which is definitely useful. Another thing that I would like to mention is that the real value from, I don't think this is your typical masters where you're competing on grades. And if I had to give an advice to future potential students, is that to mainly try to focus on gaining as much knowledge as possible. Because whether directly from the course or by discussing and meeting other students and debating on ideas and meeting your mentors, which are very valuable, at least from my experience, which was really valuable, the mentorship program. And yeah, I think as for the network, it is truly valuable whether you are from a national level or even international. So yeah.
Hi, my name is Sharina. Yeah, so I started the program in September, and I was on the other side of the table and sharing my experience. And I definitely wear all the Cambridge merch every day because it is such a humbling experience to be part of Cambridge University, and pretty much echoing a lot of what Taha said in terms of the people that you meet whilst you're here and on your cohort. I think the best thing about it is that we aren't all just focused on our disciplines. We're actually, talking to people that are having education businesses. So my background is property, and now I do a little bit more kind of in the media space in terms of podcasting and sharing sort of the education side. But yeah, so I think kind of meeting people from all different backgrounds, lots of people from different ages as well, ethnicities. And as part of a class, we have our group, which we meet every Sunday. So there's 5 of us. We're part of a working group, and that kind of networking, and it's got to a point where if I've got a problem during the week with my business, I'll go and speak to them. And that was one of the reasons I even decided to come onto the MST program, because for the last 3.5 years, when I was having, going along my venture, I just didn't have people that were going through the same pains myself. And now having people that are similarly, they've either been part of that experience, it feels like free counseling, which is really helpful. But yeah, I think in terms of the program, it's really opened my eyes to subjects that I've stayed away from. And I know Jeremy was telling us about systems, whilst it hasn't been applicable to mine in the past. But now I'm kind of like, oh, I was sort of doing that in some realms of my business unknowingly. And now I've obviously got the framework that goes behind it. So it will be challenging. And I guess that's the reason that you're even on the call, because you're looking for that kind of next step in your career and that next adventure. And but at the same time, it will be amazingly rewarding. I decided to even move to Cambridge. That's not you don't have to do that if you're part of the MST program. But I really wanted to kind of embed myself in the whole Cambridge experience and get involved with societies. So well done for even being on the call. And it really goes to show, even if you're part of this call, in a year's time you can be on the program. So the only thing that's going to stop you is actually just applying.
Yeah, so thank you both for that.
Jeremy,
yes.
May I add something else? I forgot an important point, which was the alumni network. Honestly, when you're part of the MST, you join the alumni network, and so you kind of even extend more your network by meeting people from previous cohorts and future cohorts. That's how I met Sharina, because we're not on the same cohort. And honestly, I think this is part of that entrepreneurial mindset that most of the students have, that everybody's willing to help. Everybody's willing to make the connections with their own network. So yeah, if you want to network, probably the MST Entrepreneurship is the best program for that, because everybody has that mindset. And another
I'm just
point,
going to
maybe,
go off the.
Go for it.
I just saw a message on the chat about how related we are with the MBA program. I think someone said, what was the relationship between the MBA and the MST? The program team themselves have actually been putting networking events in, and they have been so valuable. So almost like speed networking events where we can get to know them, so that there is a really nice kind of relationship between the two, only if you want to participate. And again, a big part of coming to Cambridge University is there's so much you can do. There's literally a club and a society for everything you can think of, but it's how much you're willing to get involved as well. I can sit here and plan the next 3 months evenings of just dialing into the most amazing speakers, from Bill Gates all the way through to Jane Goodall. And then I could also dial into a very different event where I'm learning more from kind of classmates and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot to get involved in if you do come here in terms of networking.
Yeah, thank you. I think on that, there's the MBA entrepreneurship program in terms of differences, right? This is one where people often ask, okay, what's the difference between going to an MBA, especially if you think of a Cambridge MBA, right? So a Cambridge MBA, because we're in Cambridge and entrepreneurship is just such a big part of everything that is Cambridge. Naturally, we have more courses in innovation entrepreneurship. I generally sort of think of it, and I've had other pictures where you could look at it as a distribution of student body, right? And it's, yes, in an MBA you have entrepreneurs and you have people who are interested in it. That's not usually the bulk of the distribution, the bulk, the core of the student body. Same as in our program, the core of the student body, as Tana and Sharina have alluded to, is just focused on entrepreneurship and has this same mindset. And even those that are inside of large firms, right? So to ours, it sort of flips the distribution, and on the fringes, we do have people that are within large organizations, but want to understand and learn about the entrepreneurial experience, and they want to take that mindset, that practice, that process, and make it work within their organizations. So it's sort of, whether or not you're the fringes, it might not be fringes, but the lesser part of the distribution in an MBA is entrepreneurs. They're the bulk of the distribution in our program, right? And everything, so when I talked about sort of the social venture versus ours, well, the MBA is the cross section on that. Even ours is the cross section with a singular focus on entrepreneurship, right? So we're not looking at consultants, we're not looking at finance, that's not the main focus. A lot of there's the main levers and subject matter. As one faculty colleague had said, entrepreneurship very often is in the shadows of large business and innovation. A lot of the fundamental drivers are similar, but it's the discussions that happen among our cohort of, it's all through an entrepreneurial lens. Okay, well, how is this applicable to entrepreneurship? And that's really what differs between an MBA and the entrepreneurship program. The other question and it was somewhat related to the last webinar, in terms of the evaluation of different students, of fresh grads versus experience, right? This is one where, because we very much pride ourselves on, we range from the low 20s up into the 60s at times, right? Into the latter parts of career. And we're really proud of that, because they can each help each other a lot, right? And yes, in terms of this, when we talk selection criteria, yeah, it's one where we always, if I said one thing, it's making sure that everybody is here because they're at that intersection, right? So we're not a program where it's these three pillars, pick one, pick two. You have to want all three. And naturally, on the recent grad side, we want to make sure that people, aren't just prolonging reality and saying, I just want to get another degree and another degree, and I don't really want to try and do something. right? So on the recent uni grads, we get people who are doers. We get people who have initiative. I think, Taha, I'm sure it's one of, you look at stuff, are you really doing things, right? Can you show initiative that you're getting things done, right? That you're not just like, that sounds cool, right? Let me learn about that. I did this other degree and that, I don't think I want that now, so let me try this one. That doesn't fit as well. And then on the more senior side of things, it's one of, are you really coming, do you really want to dig into academics, and do you really want to go back to school? Or are you just trying for a network, right? Do you want all three? And it's one of, these are the things that, again, we take a lot of care on this because our students and the sort of the mix of the cohort is what makes the program special. So yes, it's not, but we welcome all those backgrounds in wholeheartedly. That kind of is on the what kind of a profile is best suited for this program. That is the last webinar, and one where the short answer is there is no singular profile, and we're really, really, really proud of that. But you have to, we want to make sure people understand what we're about, and and that's the right thing for you, right? So if there's another program or an accelerator or something else would be better for you, then do that. But it's mainly, is this the right program for you? Then, and you're looking at it realistically. In terms of, I think practical topics on effectively raising capital, you could even look at, that's a good example of where we come at this from many different angles, right? So this is one, a topic like that is one where it'll be touched upon in an entrepreneurial finance course. It'll be touched upon in a pitching and raising capital elective, and it'll be touched upon by industry speakers coming in, talking about how to look at term sheets and how when they were a venture capitalist, this is the term sheet they like to do. But when they were an entrepreneur, understanding the different perspectives and what each stakeholder is trying to get out of a term sheet. Do you understand dilution? Do you understand the different, is it the right time to raise finance? And that's, that could be an industry seminar. And then it's also, there's lots of times where this happens among peers. Like, wait a second, I've been trying to do this. What's your experience been? And this is the benefit of having students that are at all different phases of their venture, career, and everything. So that sort of a topic is one, it's actually a really good example of how it gets hit upon from each different angle. And it touches, it's a practical topic, but it's not to say that there's no academic theory to it, and that everybody can contribute. So field trips, we don't do field trips. I think that's, I think it's one where what we do is bring speakers in. So when people are here in Cambridge and we have those residentials, unfortunately, we're, right now we're prohibited from doing that. So we do everything online. We bring speakers to you. Now we do it virtually, right? So we bring speakers to you, and it's in terms of all of these different topics. And they're going to touch that, and they can then speak to their experience. But we don't have we only have 4 weeks when people are here in Cambridge. They're packed. Putting field trips into that is not something that would just take up, isn't the most valuable use of the time there.
Another question that's kind of actually one of the things you didn't mention, Jeremy, is that actually the learning material that we provide is quite a lot, isn't it? So it's kind of almost like never ending with reading lists and so on, so that people that really want to knock themselves out on a particular topic have got the opportunity to do that, which leads to another question that was asked in the chat earlier, is how many hours are people spending on their learning material? Again, maybe something to ask our students, because I think that varies.
So let me give the backdrop to that and then hand over to the students, because it's one where this is where averages, medians don't provide all the information. There's huge variance around that. I think it's also the reason I wanted to just give a little backdrop, because I think it would even be different from Taha's cohort to Sharina's. I think this, this first Michaelmas term, my guess was heavier. Even the median was probably above the what we would target in terms of, I think, what's the official on that? I think the official statement that we try to target on that is that it's going to be at a median, again, importantly, median with lots of variance and distributions that Sharina was exposed to lots of in the systems course here, of around that of, okay, probably 10 hours a week is the target. Now, that means some people are also going to shift your work, and there's going to be weeks where it's 20 and there's going to be weeks where it's 2. That said, that's what we're trying for. Whether it's going to be different for everybody. I'll hand over to you guys to give the real answer now.
Sharina, you want to go for it?
How did I know you were going to make me do that?
Yeah.
I'll follow up then on my experience after you, but go for it.
So I would say definitely, so Michaelmas term, I'd moved to Cambridge. I was trying to get involved with as many live sessions and networking events that were happening in Cambridge. So that term looks very different to obviously this term being locked down. I would say I dedicate roughly about, so we get new units released to us every 2 weeks. I try and do a solid 2 to 3 days of studying all 4 units. So it's hard to put a number around it. And then obviously assessment time, you're buried in it and you don't really do much else but try and get your deadlines together. So we all work very differently. Something that we stick to is we have our individual group works, and we have a call every Sunday night for about an hour and a half. That ramped up towards when we were doing our assessments. But yeah, sorry, I mean, we all learn it at different rates, and it depends, as you Kirsten said, you've got your kind of core reading, and then you've got a lovely long list of recommended. You can sometimes cherry pick what you want, and those articles could be anything from 10 pages to a quick 2-page or a link to a website. So there's enough for you to do there.
Yeah, let me interject just because I think it's one where I think it somewhat puts you guys in a tough position there, because also it's one where one of the best ways on this is because again, if we get to where's this question coming from, right? And usually this question is coming from, okay, I'm working on my venture. Am I going to be able to get this done at the same time as my, for lack of a better term, day job, right? So I have things to get done, and that's really the core. And that's one of for most people, they find a way, and there's the flexibility. So you heard Sharina saying, like, I usually do it in days, and I have a block of days that I do it. Other people try and spread it out and might have a block within each day. Some people, it's the truth, right? They're released in fortnightly, but they actually will leave it, and then 3 weeks later we'll catch up on all of that. That's not my recommended mode of operation, but that is definitely, that happens. It's one on that. It's really up to you to be diligent of how you're going to plan it. There's a lot of flexibility in there. You do have to have good time management skills to make sure you don't fall behind. So generally it's if you leave it to a large block and think, oh, I'll get it. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, you said it's 10 hours, but it was 40 hours I spent this week. Forgetting that there was 0 for the past 5, but it's a hard one to put a number on. It really is. It is one where, we don't want people, and I've had conversations with potential candidates. I've even had conversations with people that were accepted when we recognized, wait a second, it just wasn't the right time. There was just too much going on, and it was better to wait. So those are conversations, we'll have. We don't want someone on the program when it's not possible, right? So it is really important that it's a good question, and it's one a lot of the time what we would try to do, if it's something that you're really, really concerned about, is even connect you with a student who's in a similar situation to you, and see if you could talk to that student through your situation if our guidance wasn't good enough there.
I'll just add, Jeremy, if that's okay. I think there are two, as you mentioned, Jeremy, there are 2 types of students: the ones that are more consistent, and the ones that let everything pile up and then go through the assessment. At 10 hours a week, is a good average. But I think the best way to go through this program is to really try to study it every day. And I'll say it again to all new students that ask me about this tip, because first of all, you learn better. It's much better to learn consistently. And second of all, it is, you try to build that habit of independent learning, which is something that is useful, that will be useful for entrepreneurs for the rest of their lives. I mean, the world is constantly changing, the environment is constantly changing. We need to learn how to learn. And this program definitely helped. Just to answer maybe Turo questions, are distant classes all live, virtual, or mostly recorded? I don't know if it changed, but for me at least, it was they were live, and then if you couldn't attend, they're recorded. It's the same format, right?
Yeah, and it's one of on that. It's really the format is blended, right? So it's one during the residentials, or what we've had on even the virtual residentials. Those are obviously live sessions with faculty and also on the industry ones. Then that's mixed with, there is content on there that's the more static content, but it's static in the sense of it's put together and there's exercises and there's content and there's readings, but then it also, where it's not static, is the engagement and dialogue that happens in the discussion forums among students. And then throughout the time between residentials, there's every class, every module has a set of webinars. So everyone has 3 webinars in it. So it's, if you think about all of the modules that you have, each one has 3 webinars throughout the term. There's always that live component. So it really is a truly blended format. That's one that I touch on a lot. That's the unexpected silver lining that comes about through the whole COVID period, is we just have learned how to do that a lot better, right? So blended learning and online and distance and the networking and the community, we can do that better online than definitely we could have a year ago. So that's, yeah, thank you for highlighting that one, Taha. And those are all recorded, right? Yes, and thank you, Sharina, for answering this. Part-time, it's one of those, the clarification there, part-time isn't because it's a full degree. Part-time is one of those where it allows you the flexibility, right? So it's one, and it means it's going on, 12 months a year, but at any one time, you have the flexibility to pursue your job, your venture, everything else, and do this, and that's what the part-time is. You're here required, those 4 weeks out of the year those are the 4 weeks where you're required to be there for that time. Outside of those 4 weeks, there's lots and lots of flexibility. Let's, Kirsten, Lara, anyone else, if there's I think it's one of those, there's reaching out to the students. I think we have on the website, there's ways to reach out to students, and there's sort of student stories, so you can definitely reach out to the program. I did see something in there I happened to catch in terms of applications. Should that be sent directly to me? No, please don't. Definitely send that to the program. There's a good chance it'll get lost if it gets sent directly to me. There's definitely, use the email, use the website to contact the program team. We'd be happy to follow up with you on that. And then with that, I think thank you for being here. It is a pleasure to share those, even with my enthusiasm that we get. But reach out to us, connect with us.
The contact details are in the chat, and you will also find it all over our website. So if we didn't get around to answering your question today, I apologize, but send it to us again, and we can answer that for sure. Yeah, we will try in this one or in future webinars to get to all the questions. So hopefully we've got to the bulk of them and provided a better understanding. And look forward to. Good luck to everyone applying. Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Sharina, Taha, Kirsten, Lara. Pleasure. Yes, thank you very much, Sharina and Taha. Cheers.
It was a pleasure. See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.